The morning sun rose softly over New Delhi, spreading warm light across the city's busy streets. The Global Education Summit was about to begin, and the air outside the convention hall carried a mix of excitement and expectation. Leaders, teachers, and innovators from around the world were gathering to celebrate those who had changed lives through education. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and banners carried the names of world leaders. Yet one seat near the front remained quietly unnoticed. It belonged to Anjali Pichai, who sat calmly in a simple cream sari, her hands folded in her lap, watching the stage with gentle eyes. Sundar Pichai stood backstage, reviewing his notes one last time. He had attended many summits before, but this one felt different. He was proud because India's digital education project had reached even the smallest villages. He knew this achievement wasn't just about technology. It was about giving children hope through light, connection, and learning. As the host introduced the next segment, Sundar took a deep breath, expecting to be called on stage to receive a recognition award from the Prime Minister himself. But something unexpected happened. The hall grew silent as Prime Minister Narendra Modi walked up to the microphone. The crowd stood up, clapping respectfully. The Prime Minister smiled warmly, looking around the audience before speaking in a calm and powerful voice. "Today," he said, "we honor someone whose quiet efforts changed lives more deeply than headlines ever could." The crowd murmured in curiosity. Sundar looked up, slightly confused. Modi continued, "Many of you know about our rural learning network, the one that brought solar-powered classrooms to thousands of villages. What you may not know is that when one of our main centers failed during a sandstorm in Rajasthan, it was not a government team or a company that fixed it. It was a single anonymous volunteer who left only a message behind: every child deserves light." A hush fell over the room. Sundar frowned slightly, trying to recall if one of Google's teams had been involved, but the description didn't fit any official program he knew of. The Prime Minister paused, allowing the suspense to grow. That volunteer never asked for credit, never revealed a name. The government tried to find out who it was, but every lead ended in silence. Until recently, the audience leaned forward. Even the reporters stopped typing. Sundar glanced toward Anjali, who was still sitting quietly. Her eyes lowered, as if she already knew something he did not. Her calm expression made Sundar's heart beat faster. Something about her silence felt like a secret waiting to be revealed. Modi smiled gently. "Today I wish to thank that person publicly," he said, his voice warm but steady. "And that person is sitting among us right now." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The camera lights turned toward the audience, and then Modi spoke again, softly but clearly. "Anjali Pichai, will you please stand up?" A wave of surprise ran through the hall. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. The audience gasped and then erupted in applause. Anjali rose slowly, her face glowing with humility and shock. Sundar stared at her in disbelief, his eyes searching hers for answers. Reporters began whispering and snapping photos as Modi stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. "Mrs. Pichai," Modi said kindly, "our country owes you gratitude for your quiet work and your belief that no child should be left behind in darkness. You have proven that true leadership needs no spotlight." The applause grew louder. Sundar's chest tightened as pride and emotion mixed inside him. He had always known his wife's kindness, but he had never imagined she was the one behind the mysterious AP signature that had guided India's education project during its hardest days. Anjali bowed slightly, her voice gentle when she spoke. "Sir, I only wanted to help children study." "I never thought anyone would notice," Modi smiled. "Real kindness always finds its way to light." The crowd rose for a standing ovation. Sundar stood up too, his heart full. As the applause echoed through the grand hall, his eyes met hers, and for a moment the noise faded. He saw the same woman he had met years ago in college, the same calm eyes, the same soft strength, the same heart that believed in small acts of goodness. He realized this recognition wasn't just an award. It was a reminder that quiet people could change the world without ever seeking praise. After the applause ended, Modi invited both of them on stage. As Sundar walked beside Anjali, he felt an unusual mix of surprise and pride. Cameras flashed, but his focus stayed on her. When they reached the stage, Modi handed Anjali a small clay lamp. "This lamp," he said, represents the light you gave to so many children. May its flame never fade." Anjali accepted it with trembling hands. Sundar looked at her, his eyes soft with emotion. He didn't speak, but his expression said everything: admiration, pride, and love. The crowd sensed it too. That silent moment between husband and wife touched everyone more than words could. The audience felt something pure: respect for a woman who chose humility over fame, and for a man who was proud not of power, but of kindness. As they left the stage, the media rushed to capture their reactions. Microphones reached forward, asking questions about her secret work, but Anjali only smiled and said, "It was never a secret. It was love." Later that night, as the hall emptied, Sundar and Anjali walked quietly under the warm lights of the city. Sundar finally spoke in a soft voice. "You never told me." Anjali smiled, looking at the distant skyline. "Some things grow best in silence. I didn't do it for attention. I did it because I remembered how hard it was for us to study by candlelight when we were young. I wanted no child to face that again." Sundar's eyes filled with pride. He nodded slowly, understanding everything she meant. The city noise faded around them. In that stillness, he realized that the greatest achievements weren't built in boardrooms or labs. They were born in quiet hearts that refused to look away from others' struggles. As they reached their car, Sundar turned to her and said softly, "Today, the world saw what I always knew. You are the brightest light I know." Anjali smiled, her eyes shining. "Then let's make sure it never goes out." And as they drove away, the clay lamp on the back seat glowed faintly, its flame steady and peaceful, just like the love and kindness that guided it. The next morning, the world was still talking about what had happened at the summit. Newspapers across India carried headlines about Anjali Pichai's unexpected recognition, social media filled with messages praising her humility and kindness. But while the world was celebrating, Sundar Pichai was lost in thought. He sat by the window of their hotel room, watching the early light touch the city skyline. He had seen many honors in his life, yet none had felt as emotional as this. He kept replaying the moment when Modi ji had called her name, the look of calm surprise on her face and the quiet strength she carried as the entire world applauded her. Anjali walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. She smiled as she handed one to Sundar. "You look serious," she said softly. "I'm still trying to understand how you managed to do all this," Sundar replied. "You helped build those solar classrooms, you managed teachers, and you never told anyone?" "Not even me." Anjali sat beside him, holding her cup between her hands. "It started small," she said. "Remember the village we visited in Rajasthan years ago? The one where the children had no electricity after sunset?" Sundar nodded. "I remember. They had only one old lantern in the entire school." "Yes," Anjali said. "That image never left me. I couldn't sleep for days after seeing those children trying to study by candlelight. So I began sending small donations, quietly, using a different name. At first, it was only to buy a few solar lamps. But when I saw how quickly the children's grades improved, I realized that light changes more than visibility. It changes hope." Her voice carried warmth and honesty that touched Sundar deeply. He looked at her, his eyes full of quiet admiration. "And that's when you started the project?" Anjali nodded. "Yes, but I didn't want to create another organization. I wanted it to stay personal. I contacted a few engineers who worked on solar panels and told them about my idea. They agreed to help. Then I reached out to teachers directly. I told them to share their students' needs. One by one, schools began receiving small boxes of equipment: solar panels, internet routers, tablets for children. But I never signed my name. I always used the initials AP. Sundar smiled faintly. Anjali Pichai. No wonder Modi ji called it mysterious. Anjali laughed softly. "I thought no one would ever find out. I just wanted to help quietly. I never wanted anyone to connect it to you or to Google. I wanted it to stay pure, human to human." Sundar placed his hand over hers. "You didn't just give them light, Anjali. You gave them dignity. You gave them a chance to dream." There was silence for a while. Outside, the sound of distant traffic mixed with the morning birds. Sundar took a deep breath. "Modi ji was right," he said. "True leadership doesn't need titles. It's about giving without expecting anything back." Anjali smiled, her eyes glistening. Every time I saw a photo of a child studying under one of those lamps, it reminded me that small acts can travel farther than we think. Later that day, the couple attended a private meeting arranged by Modi ji. He wanted to discuss expanding the solar education project across India. As they entered the Prime Minister's residence, they were greeted with warmth and respect. Modi ji welcomed them personally, smiling broadly. "Mrs. Pichai," he said, "you have done what even governments struggle to do, reach the heart of rural India." Anjali folded her hands respectfully. "Sir, I only followed what I learned from my mother. Help quietly because kindness is not a performance," Modi ji nodded. "And that is exactly why it touched people so deeply. Your light came from sincerity, not ambition." They sat together around a simple wooden table. Files, photos, and reports lay open in front of them. As Modi ji flipped through the pages, he pointed at a photograph of a small village school glowing at night. "Do you remember this one?" he asked. Anjali's eyes softened. "Yes, that was one of the first. I remember the headmaster calling me, saying his students cried when they saw the light come on for the first time. And do you know," Modi ji said, smiling, "that same school has now become a model center for nearby villages? Their students are teaching others. Your one act started a chain of kindness." Anjali looked down, overwhelmed. Sundar sat beside her, quietly proud. The Prime Minister then turned to Sundar. "Mr. Pichai, you have given the world many innovations, but what your wife has done will outlive every invention. She has given light not only to classrooms but also to hearts." Sundar nodded humbly. "Sir, she has always been my teacher. I may build products, but she builds people." Modi ji smiled at both of them. "The country needs both kinds of builders," he said. "One builds the bridge of technology, the other builds the bridge of humanity." After the meeting, an assistant handed Anjali a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from a girl in Rajasthan named Meera. The letter read, "Dear AP, we study under your lamps every night. When it rains, the power goes off, but your light never fails. We call it our hope light. Thank you for not forgetting us." Anjali's hands trembled slightly as she read. Sundar leaned closer to look at the drawing on the bottom of the page, a simple sketch of a small lamp with 3 children reading under it. He whispered softly, "They call it their hope light." "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Anjali folded the letter carefully and said, "I want to visit them." Sundar looked at her with a smile. "Then we will." That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Sundar and Anjali sat together on the hotel terrace. Below them, the city lights flickered like stars, and the sound of life filled the air. Anjali watched the horizon and said quietly, "The world often looks at success through numbers and fame, but real success is when someone far away smiles because of what you did without expecting a reward." Sundar nodded slowly. "And that's what they felt yesterday when Modi ji thanked you. He wasn't just thanking you for lamps. He was thanking you for giving India's children a reason to believe." Anjali turned toward him. "You think they'll remember it?" Sundar smiled. "They will, because light never forgets where it came from." The two sat silently for a long time, watching the night settle over Delhi. The moment felt timeless, like the calm after a storm. Neither needed to speak. The silence itself was full of meaning, a quiet understanding between two hearts that believed in the same truth. That kindness, once shared, never fades. The next day, their journey would take them to Rajasthan. They didn't know yet that what awaited them there would be more than just gratitude. It would be a truth so deep and unexpected that it would change how they both saw kindness forever. 2 days later, the golden morning sun painted the skies as Sundar and Anjali boarded a simple government jeep heading toward the small town of Bhilwara in Rajasthan. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding between dry fields, sand dunes, and clusters of small huts that shimmered in the heat. It was a long way from the glass towers and conference halls they were used to. The further they went, the more peaceful everything became. No flashing cameras, no applause, no noise. Just the sound of the engine, the wind, and the quiet hum of life along the road. Anjali sat by the window, watching women draw water from wells and children wave as the jeep passed by. Sundar leaned back, smiling as he watched her face. She looked calmer than he had ever seen her. It felt as if she belonged here. In this simple world she had helped brighten from far away. "You seem happy," he said gently. Anjali smiled. "I am. These are the places that remind me why we do what we do." After a few hours, they reached the village school that had been the first to receive her solar lamps. Colorful drawings decorated the walls, and the laughter of children filled the air. The headmaster, a humble man named Rajesh, came running toward them, folding his hands respectfully. "Madam, sir, welcome," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "We never thought we would see the person who gave us light." Anjali smiled shyly. "You gave it to the children, not me. I just helped a little." Rajesh's eyes filled with emotion. "No, madam, you gave them more than light. You gave them a reason to believe that the world cares about them." He led them into a small classroom. The walls were bright with charts and pictures drawn by students. Sunlight streamed through the windows, mixing with the soft golden glow from solar lamps. Dozens of children sat cross-legged, reading books. When they saw Anjali, they stood up and greeted her in one voice. "Good morning, madam." Anjali's eyes softened. She knelt beside a little girl with braided hair who was reading aloud from her book. "What are you studying?" she asked. "English poems, madam," the girl said proudly. "I can recite one," Anjali smiled. "Please do." The girl stood tall and began to recite softly. "The lamp of hope. It shines so bright. It helps us read. It gives us light. When dreams were dark, it made them glow. Thank you, AP, for making it so." The entire class clapped. Sundar's eyes glistened. He turned toward Anjali and whispered, "They even made a poem for you." Anjali's voice trembled with emotion. "No, they made it for every kind heart that believes in light." After class, Rajesh showed them around the campus. They stopped by the courtyard where a small solar unit stood quietly, powering everything. The metal box was old but still strong. Its side bore faded letters, AP Project 1. Sundar bent down, brushing dust from it. The sight hit him with unexpected emotion. This was where her journey had begun, years ago, without his knowledge, without credit or recognition, just purpose. Suddenly, a teacher approached with a small notebook. "Madam," she said, "there is something you might want to see." Anjali opened the notebook carefully. Inside were dozens of letters written by students to Dear AP. Some were simple drawings, others full of gratitude. One letter caught her attention. It was signed by a name she hadn't heard before, Ravi Kumar. The letter read, "Dear AP, my father worked at the old power station. He said he once met a woman who told him, 'Every child deserves light.' I think that was you. Thank you. I want to become an engineer like my father, and I will make new lights too." Anjali's eyes stayed fixed on the name. She turned to Rajesh. "Who is this boy?" Rajesh looked surprised. "Ravi lives on the edge of the village. His father passed away last year in a factory accident. The boy is brilliant, but his family is poor. Still, he studies every night under the lamps you sent." Anjali nodded silently. "Can we meet him?" Rajesh smiled. "Of course." They walked through narrow lanes lined with clay houses until they reached a small hut. Outside, a young boy sat repairing an old radio with tools made from scrap metal. When he saw them, he jumped up politely. "Namaste, madam," he said, his voice shy but steady. Anjali smiled kindly. "Are you Ravi?" He nodded. "Yes, madam. My teacher said you wanted to see me." Sundar crouched beside him, curious. "You're fixing this radio all by yourself?" "Yes, sir," the boy said. "I learned from my father. He always said light and sound both connect people. I want to fix both someday." Anjali's heart melted. "Your father must be very proud of you." The boy looked down for a moment. "He used to work at the old power plant before it shut down. One night, after a big storm, the power failed across the village. But then a lady came and gave us a small lamp. He never forgot her words. Every child deserves light. He used to tell me that story every night." Anjali froze. Sundar looked at her, realizing the connection. She whispered softly, "That was me." Ravi looked up in surprise. You're that lady?" She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't know your father remembered that night." Ravi smiled, his eyes bright. "He said that night changed him. He said light can come from people, not just wires. Sundar placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Your father was right. And now that light is in you, Ravi grinned. I will keep it alive, sir. Anjali reached into her bag and pulled out a small solar lamp. This one is for you, she said softly. For your dreams. The boy took it with trembling hands. Thank you, madam. I will make it shine brighter than ever. As they walked back toward the jeep, Sundar was quiet. His mind replayed every word the boy had said. It was as if the past and present had met in that tiny hut. Anjali's single act years ago had not only brought light, but had created a chain of purpose that kept growing. On the way back, Rajesh spoke quietly from the front seat. Madam, there is one more thing. The local elders wanted to show you something. They said it is connected to your project. Anjali looked puzzled. Connected how? It's about the first donation that started everything, Rajesh said. We found something unusual about it. The bank record shows it came from a small account with the initials MG. Sundar frowned. MG? Rajesh nodded. Yes, sir. And the message written with it said, For the woman who believes every child deserves light. Anjali's heart skipped a beat. Someone helped me before I even began. The jeep rolled down the dusty road as the evening sun painted the desert gold. Sundar and Anjali exchanged a long look. They didn't know who MAG was or why that person had believed in her so early, but both could feel it. The story was far from over. Someone had silently guided her journey just as she had guided others, and tomorrow they would find out who. The next morning, the sun rose bright over the desert horizon. Sundar and Anjali stood outside the small guest house where they had stayed, sipping tea as the air filled with the soft sound of temple bells. Neither of them had slept much. The mystery of the initials MG lingered in their minds. Who had quietly supported Anjali's project years ago? Who had known her message before it ever became famous? Rajesh arrived soon after, holding a small folder. Madam, sir, he said respectfully, the elders are waiting for you at the old library hall. They said they can explain everything about the MG donation. The drive to the library took only a few minutes, but the silence inside the jeep felt longer. Sundar watched Anjali, noticing how calm she looked despite the uncertainty. He knew she wasn't seeking credit or answers for herself. She only wanted to understand the kindness that had started it all. When they reached the old hall, they found several village elders seated near a long wooden table. One of them, an elderly man with kind eyes, stood and greeted them warmly. Welcome, madam. We have been waiting for you. You may not remember, but years ago you came here during a flood relief visit. You gave us a box of small solar lamps. Anjali nodded slowly. I remember. The power was gone for days, and the school was closed. The old man smiled. After you left, a letter arrived for us from someone in Delhi. It came with the first donation that helped us rebuild this hall and buy new panels. The letter said, For the woman who believes every child deserves light. It was signed with 2 letters, MG. He opened the folder and handed her the letter. The paper was faded, but the writing was still clear. Anjali traced the words with her fingers. Her throat tightened as she whispered, Who sent this? The elder pointed to an old frame photograph hanging on the wall. It showed a younger man pouring tea beside a visiting government officer. The donor was a man named Mahendrabhai Gadhvi, he said softly. He owned the tea stall near the main road. He passed away 2 years ago. Anjali's eyes widened. Sundar looked at her in disbelief. A tea seller? He said quietly. The elder nodded. Yes, sir. He was a humble man. But years ago, Prime Minister Modi visited this area during his early service days. He used to stop at Mahendrabhai's stall often. They became friends. When Mahendrabhai heard about your project, he said, I know that man will understand. He sent his savings and asked that the donation remain anonymous. A sudden stillness filled the room. Anjali looked up slowly. Did Modi ji know about this? The elder nodded again. He knew, but he never spoke about it. He said true kindness doesn't need applause. Sundar exhaled deeply, realizing the depth of the connection. The first light that Anjali had ever shared had been made possible by a humble tea seller who once inspired Modi himself. And now, years later, Modi had publicly thanked her for spreading that same light back to the villages where it all began. The kindness had traveled in a perfect circle without anyone planning it. Anjali's eyes glistened. Mahendrabhai gave the first spark, and I didn't even know. The elder smiled. He believed in you before the world did. Outside, the sound of children laughing drifted through the air. Sundar turned toward the window and watched the schoolyard glow under the bright sunlight. He whispered, "It feels like every kindness finds its way home." Anjali smiled faintly, holding the old letter close to her heart. "It does," she said softly, "and it never forgets the hands that started it." As they left the hall, Sundar looked at the sky and said quietly, "Then tomorrow, we will thank the man who began it all." The journey that started with one anonymous message was about to come full circle once again, this time in front of the man who had inspired it without knowing. The next day felt heavy with emotion and anticipation. The morning breeze carried a sense of calm as Sundar and Anjali stood outside their small guest house, preparing to return to New Delhi. They both knew what needed to happen next. The truth about Mahendrabhai Gadhvi, the humble tea seller who had unknowingly started a chain of kindness, had to be shared with the man whose own journey began beside that very tea stall, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As their car rolled through the desert road, Sundar remained silent, looking out the window. He was deep in thought, replaying everything they had discovered. A tea seller had believed in Anjali's dream long before anyone else, and that faith had ignited a movement that changed thousands of lives. It was as if fate had woven invisible threads of goodness between people who had never met, connecting hearts across time and distance. Anjali, sitting beside him, finally spoke softly. "When we meet Modiji, I don't want to speak about my work," she said. "I want to speak about Mahendrabhai. His name should be remembered." Sundar nodded. "That's exactly what we'll do." By the time they reached New Delhi, the Prime Minister's office had already arranged a private meeting. The evening sun bathed the capital in gold as they entered the peaceful garden behind the official residence. Modiji greeted them warmly, his expression calm but curious. "Welcome back," he said kindly. "I see your visit to Rajasthan has brought you answers." Anjali folded her hands respectfully. "Yes, sir." "And those answers belong to someone far humbler than me." Modiji tilted his head slightly. "Go on." Anjali took a slow breath and began telling the story. The discovery of the letter, the donation from the man named Mahendrabhai Gadhvi, and how that one act of faith had helped start her first project. She described the village, the children, and the way Mahendrabhai's words had carried the same message she had written years later. Every child deserves light. When she finished speaking, silence filled the garden. The Prime Minister's eyes softened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he walked toward a small bench beneath a tree and sat down, lost in thought. His face showed both surprise and deep emotion. "Mahendrabhai Gadhvi," he repeated quietly. "I have not heard that name in years." Anjali and Sundar exchanged a look. "You knew him, sir?" Sundar asked gently. Modiji nodded slowly. "Yes. When I was young, before I entered public service, I used to stop at his tea stall. He was not only a tea seller, he was a philosopher of kindness. He used to say, 'People may forget your tea, but they will never forget how you treated them.' He helped me many times when I had nothing. I always told myself that one day I would honor his spirit. And now," he paused, his voice softer, "you already have." Anjali's eyes glistened. "Sir, he believed in me before anyone did. His small acts started everything." Modiji looked at her, smiling gently. "And your light continued what his flame began. This is how kindness moves, quietly, from one heart to another, until it becomes a chain no storm can break." He stood up and walked toward them. "Tomorrow I will tell this story publicly. Not because of politics or praise, but because India must remember that greatness begins in small hearts." Anjali looked startled. "Sir, that is not necessary." "It is," Modiji said firmly but with warmth. "You have given light to villages, and he gave light to your journey. This circle deserves to be known, not to glorify anyone, but to inspire everyone." Sundar smiled, his heart full. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "It will mean so much to the families and the children." The next morning, the global press gathered again at the same education summit where it had all begun. Rumors spread quickly something special was about to happen. Sundar and Anjali sat side by side in the front row holding hands tightly. Their faces were calm, but inside, both felt the weight of the moment. Modi ji stepped onto the stage as the hall filled with silence. He looked at the crowd and began to speak. "Yesterday," he said, "I learned a truth that reminded me of India's greatest strength, kindness that travels through generations. Many years ago, a humble tea seller in Rajasthan taught me that small acts can light great paths. That same man, Mahendrabhai Gadhvi, quietly supported a woman who believed every child deserves light. Her name is Anjali Pichai." The audience gasped and the cameras clicked rapidly. Modi continued, his voice strong yet emotional. "Her kindness reached millions, but it began with his. Their story reminds us that every spark of goodness we share finds its way home, no matter how long it takes." As the applause began, Modi ji turned toward Sundar and Anjali. "Today, I thank you both, not for what you achieved, but for what you reminded us. That true success is not measured by recognition, but by compassion that outlives us." The hall stood up in one collective moment of respect. Sundar rose and folded his hands toward Modi ji, his eyes moist. Anjali stepped forward humbly, her voice soft as she said, "Sir, the light belongs to everyone. I only carried it for a while," Modi ji smiled, "and that is why it shines so brightly." In that moment, the cameras caught Sundar's expression, a mix of love, pride, and awe. He looked at Anjali as if seeing her anew, not just as his wife, but as a quiet force who had changed countless lives through kindness. The audience clapped for several minutes. Even the journalists lowered their cameras, moved by the purity of what they had witnessed. It wasn't a political event anymore. It was a moment of human truth. As the lights dimmed, Modi ji announced one final gesture. "From today, the education fund supporting rural children will carry a new name, the Gadhvi Pichai Foundation. It will honor both the giver and the carrier of light." Tears filled Anjali's eyes. Sundar placed his hand on hers gently and whispered, "This is his light, your light, and our promise to keep it alive." The audience erupted in applause once again. Kindness had come full circle, from a tea stall to a global stage, from one humble heart to another. The night after the announcement felt quieter than usual. The city had gone still, but the air carried a calm energy, like the world had witnessed something deeply human and good. Sundar and Anjali sat on their balcony in Delhi, a small clay lamp burning softly between them, the same one Modi ji had handed her days earlier. Its flame flickered gently in the evening breeze, steady and warm, just like the kindness it symbolized. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the lamp, letting the silence say everything words could not. Finally, Sundar broke it softly. "You know, when Modi ji renamed the foundation, I felt something shift inside me," he said. "I've attended hundreds of ceremonies, signed thousands of documents, but I've never seen a gesture that pure. It wasn't about fame. It was about returning gratitude where it began." Anjali smiled faintly. "Mahendrabhai deserved it. He taught both of us something important, that no act of kindness is ever lost. It travels, it grows, and it always comes back home." She looked toward the distant skyline where the city lights shimmered like stars. "When I started this project," she continued, "I thought I was helping children learn. But now I see that I was learning too. Learning how compassion connects people who never meet." Sundar turned to her, his eyes gentle. "You didn't just help children. You changed how people see kindness. You made it visible again." The next morning, the story spread across India and beyond. Newspapers called it the chain of light. News channels replayed the speech where Modi ji had thanked Anjali publicly and revealed Mahendrabhai's forgotten role. Messages poured in from teachers, students, and volunteers who wanted to join the new Gadhvi Pichai Foundation. Donations flooded in, not from corporations or politicians, but from ordinary people, farmers, taxi drivers, and small shop owners, each leaving notes that read, "Every child deserves light." As the movement grew, Anjali refused any interviews. She wanted the focus to remain on the children. Instead, she traveled quietly with Sundar to new villages, meeting teachers and students who had benefited from the project. Everywhere she went, people greeted her not with grand words, but with stories of hope, gratitude, and courage. In one small school in Gujarat, a young boy handed her a notebook filled with drawings of lamps and stars. "My father used to sell tea," he said shyly. "Now I want to build solar lights too, just like the people in your story." Anjali's eyes softened. "Then you already are," she said. "Every dream starts with a spark." Sundar watched the moment quietly, his heart full. He realized that these simple, heartfelt exchanges were worth more than any title or success he had ever earned. They reminded him that technology and humanity only reach their true power when guided by compassion. Weeks later, Modi ji invited them to attend the inauguration of a new solar learning center built in honor of Mahendrabhai Gadhvi. The event was simple, without fanfare. Local villagers, teachers, and children gathered around as the Prime Minister lit the first lamp. The flame glowed brightly under the morning sun, reflected in countless small mirrors placed by the students. Each mirror represented a child who had studied under the original lamps years ago. Modi ji turned to the crowd and said, "This is what India stands for, not power, not wealth, but the light that one kind heart passes to another. This is how nations are built, not by hands alone, but by hearts that refuse to let others live in darkness." As applause filled the air, Anjali held the original clay lamp close, the one that had traveled with her from Delhi to every school she visited. She looked at Sundar, who smiled softly, understanding the emotion behind her eyes. After the ceremony, a small girl ran up to them and handed Anjali a flower. "Madam," she said, "my mother said the world is big, but kindness makes it small. Is that true?" Anjali bent down and hugged the girl gently. "Yes, my dear. Kindness makes the world close enough for hearts to touch." The crowd watched as the girl placed her flower beside the lamp. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The warm desert wind carried the faint scent of chai from a nearby stall, the same kind of stall where Mahendrabhai once stood. Sundar looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Maybe he's smiling right now." Anjali nodded, her eyes glistening. "He is, because his light never went out." As the sun began to set, the sky turned golden, and hundreds of lamps were lit across the field. Their glow spread like a river of stars flowing through the earth. Sundar, Anjali, and Modi ji stood side by side, their faces illuminated by the gentle flames. No speeches were needed. Everyone felt it, the unity, the peace, the reminder that small acts of good can outshine any darkness. That night, as they returned home, Sundar looked at Anjali and said softly, "This story began with one lamp, one message, and one man. But now it belongs to everyone." Anjali smiled. "Then let it keep traveling." Later, before sleeping, Sundar wrote a short note and placed it beside the clay lamp on their table. It read, "Light never asks who carries it. It just shines." The lamp flickered quietly, its flame steady as ever. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars. But inside that small home, the real light glowed brighter, born from humility, sustained by love, and passed on through kindness that would never fade. And so the story that began with one tea seller, found strength in one woman and pride in one man, continued its journey across countless hearts, reminding the world that true greatness is not about what we build, but about how we lift others along the way.